Hi and welcome to Whisky Shared. You're watching my review of the Summerton Whisky Club Bottle of the Month for December. I'm Toby and you're watching Whisky Shared. It's December 2019 and I've just received my Summerton Whisky Club Bottle of the Month. It's a special one. This is the first time the club has collaborated with an independent bottler to come up with their own recipe or formula, their own choice of bottling from start to finish. They worked with the Whisky Baron, who are an independent bottler, and they've come up with this unique blended malt whisky, which is a combination of an 8-year-old Glenfarclas and a 5-year-old Benriach. They then put it in an Oloroso octave for 2 months and let the ex-Oloroso barrel do its magic. If you're not familiar with the Whisky Baron, then take a look in the description and I'll put a link to his website. The bottles also feature a cool Augmented Reality feature. I'll put a clip of that on screen now so you can see that.
I see you've chosen my Augmented Reality option. To bring your label to life, simply select the dram below and I will take you on a guided tour of whiskey.
Should we find out what this tastes like? On to the whiskey. So before I pour this whiskey, it's interesting to note that it's bottled at 57.4%. So it's cask strength. It's one of only 415 bottles, and this is bottle 27. It's the first whiskey I've ever had which comes with a glass stopper. It's quite unique, and what I'll do is I'll pour some into my Summerton Whisky Festival glass. Unusually, what I'd normally do with a Summerton whiskey bottle is I'd normally unbox it immediately, pour it and give you my first impressions. But I thought a bottle of this calibre, and the fact that there probably won't be that many reviews of this because you can't just go and buy it off the shelves. It is a custom bottling for the club. I thought I'd give a more in-depth review. So what I've done is I've actually spent some time with the whiskey, nosing and tasting it before coming to review it for you on camera. I've got my Spirits People water dropper because it does actually need some water, but it is worth tasting it first without water. I've also got a notepad because I did write a lot of notes down when I was tasting this, and it really did surprise me how it developed in the glass over time. So I'll tell you, what I'm nosing, what I'm tasting, but I will also refer to my notes so I can tell you if there's anything else that I picked out that I don't get immediately from this pour. So let's nose it first. I get red wine. There's a sort of red wine on the nose. I get walnuts, raisins. There's a noticeable sort of malted barley nose there. It does smell quite young. There is a youthfulness to it. Obviously the oldest whiskey in this is 8 years old. I get toffee. It's not strong, but it is quite present. Get a hint of orange. And there is an underlying sort of fruitiness to it. The fruitiness almost has like a sourness to it, and it reminds me of the distillate that's coming out of Bimber at the moment. Their new make is very fruity and their young whiskies are very fruity. It does remind me of that. If you haven't seen my Bimber review of the Recharred Oak, I'll put a link up there. There's quite a bit of alcohol vapour, but I'd expect that. on a high ABV whiskey. That fruitiness is most present. But there is almost like an apple cider vinegar. I get that sort of, you get the sort of apple, almost like fermented apples with a hint of sort of acidity. But yeah, there's lots going on there. Let's try it on the palate. Yeah, that first mouthful, it's very fruity. You do get apples, but there's lots of heat, lots of prickly heat. And the first mouthful I ever had of it, that heat was bordering on too much. It was, yeah, it really did have a kick to it. And that heat continues for some time. It really does linger. But the more you sip it, the more that heat comes under control. So it's that first sip, it's just, it packs a punch. And it's not unpleasant, but you need to be prepared for it. It's, the mouthfeel is quite good. It's very viscous. And I think the high ABV obviously activates the saliva glands and really gets your mouth working overtime for it. But what I do get is I get that sour fruit again. So what I picked up on the nose, I pick up on the palate. It's not unpleasant. That sour fruit note it's quite unique, but it's not unpleasant. So it's difficult to convey without you obviously tasting that. But the sour fruits are almost like sort of older fermented fruits when they're starting to give off almost like an acidic sort of vapour. It's that sort of the smell and the taste that would sort of represent. It sounds unpleasant, I'm sure, but it's actually quite tasty. Let's have another sip. It's quite malty. That sort of malted cereal is quite present at all times. Yeah, that's quite nice. And there is a vanilla sweetness to it, which is nice. It is a sweet whiskey, but not too sweet. It borders between sort of the sweetness of sort of raisins and Christmas pudding with a sort of baked apple pie. It's really quite fruity, but not overly sweet. It is quite nice. But I'm going to add a few drops of water now, because it definitely changes character when you add some water. So let's give that a little bit of a mix. What the water does, it does two things, I find. It increases the cereal flavour, that sort of malted barley. It reduces the sour fruit slightly, but increases the toffee note. So that's how I find it changes the flavour. And obviously, depending on your palate, depends on how much water you add and depends on how it develops. But even without water, it changes over time in the glass, and with water it changes over time. So it's definitely one that I'd suggest, if you've got this, you should let it sit in the glass and just nose it on and off for some time. Give it a good 10-15 minutes before you even attempt to sip it. See how it develops in the glass for you, and then add some water, just a small amount, because for me I only need a small amount. You may need a bit more. Just keep working at that until you find that sweet spot. But it's probably one of the most interesting whiskies I've had finish wise. So what I'm finding is now I've drunk it and the liquid's gone and the vapor's gone, what's happening in my mouth is different compared to a lot of whiskies. I'm getting a dryness, which is to be expected. I'm getting a nuttiness. I'm getting that sort of oaky, sort of woodiness. But what I'm also getting is a taste of cinnamon. There's a cinnamon taste that lingers and it lasts for ages. So even though it's probably got, probably medium long, I'd say, without water, and medium with water, but that cinnamon note really does remind me of Christmas, and it just lingers and it sits there for ages. So if you don't have another sip for 5 minutes, you can still taste that cinnamon. And it's not unpleasant, it's not burning, and there's no heat to it, but it really is nice. And what I'm also find is, even though there's no heat, you get that sort of connection with the warmth. So once it's gone, you get that real sort of feel in the mouth, and it's really is lovely. So although it is a young whiskey and it tastes like a young whiskey, what you get is a lot of complex flavours. It's definitely got several different levels, and depending on what you've eaten or drunken recently, just before, or maybe how much water you add or how long you leave it in the glass, there's so many different variables that makes this change in the glass, and it really is an impressive dram. I was looking forward to this, but it didn't deliver what I expected. It delivered more. So I'm really pleased with the Summerton Club and the Whisky Baron for what they've managed to achieve in such a short period of time with this bottling. If you want to know more about this bottling and how it came about, I'll put a link up there, and you can go and have a look at the Summerton Club's video on it. But I think it's time for me to say goodbye. Merry Christmas, and I'll finish this dram. And if you've got this at home, I'll let you crack the doors open and have a dram too. Stauncher. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, why not give it a like or a comment, and please consider subscribing for more videos like this.